everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us wherever you are in the world, joining us from. I'm Tony Joy from Sound Particles, coming live from Los Angeles here at an amazing studio called Just for the Record. And joining me today is the amazing Matt Cerritos.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us,
Of
Matt.
course, of course.
We also have my colleagues, Luis Rodriguez and Carolina and Katerina, joining us from our headquarters in Portugal. And last but not the least, we have a good friend and esteemed partner, Westlake Pro, and representing them is JD. So thank you, everyone, for joining us once again. So we will start with introductions, right?
Yeah.
So, like I said, we are in this amazing, beautiful studio. Just for the record, in sunny Los Angeles, I am sitting in with Matt in a 914 Atmos room with PMC Monitoring, who are also one of our good friends at PMC. So, at Sound Particles, as most of you know, we work with partners and
Mhm.
engineers like Matt to make sure workflows and music is done easily. So, talking about intros, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Matt?
Yeah, so I'm Matt Cerritos. Been engineering for a little while now. Got into the Atmos game actually during the pandemic when I was actually working for Westlake Pro, where I was building Atmos rooms for Disney, Netflix, HBO. Then towards the end of the pandemic era, I met Moritz Braun, the owner of Just for the Record, and got to be brought on as the head engineer here. And then very shortly after we opened, we also made the decision to turn what used to be a stereo room into a 914 Atmos room. You guys can't really see. We on the front we have a left, center, right with some LFE, but then behind the panels, behind the cloth, there are CI65s. So they're just hidden behind everything. And then since then, we're just constantly tweaking the room, constantly trying to make it better. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of really great engineers, David Rudeau, John Castelli, Tizio, Baines. This essentially this room, because we are a public room,
Right.
we have to make sure that it's easily accessible for anybody who would like to rent it or take time to rent it for the day. And because of that, and because of the feedback that I get from these amazing engineers, and the work that I've been doing in it, we've just constantly been able to tweak it and tweak it and tweak it so that it's just becoming a space where engineers can feel confident that their mixes are going to translate out into the real world, which is awesome. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, I have to say that, I've been in LA for a little over 15 years now, and I've been to multiple rooms
Yeah.
during my career. And this is one of the most inspiring rooms I've been in
Yeah.
because I love technology, right? But like Matt said, you don't see the speakers, and it actually adds to the inspiration. So
Hmm.
there is amazing technology behind these walls.
Yeah.
But when you're in the space, it's very creative. So if you are based in Los Angeles, if you're looking for a studio space that's inspiring and fun to work in with an amazing crew,
Mhm.
including Matt, check out Just for the Records in Los Angeles.
Thank you.
So you have about 5 rooms here, right?
Yeah, there's about 5 rooms, so only one Atmos room, and then the other four are all stereo rooms with vocal booths. And then we've also had the ability. Just recently, I redid one of the rooms that is sort of a live room,
Uh huh.
and because all the rooms are technically connected via some patch points,
Right.
so one room, if we really wanted to, we just literally push the desk to the wall. It turns into this giant live room that we
Nice.
can patch and like still have people hang out and play together more efficiently.
That's awesome.
So.
So yeah, anyone looking to rent or work in an amazing space in Los Angeles, check out Just for the Record.
Mm,
So now we are going to look at an amazing session that
mhm.
I heard. Again, I wish all of you could be here in person, but hopefully the binaural that we are going to share will be as good. So we will be jumping into a Pro Tools session to look at one of the mixes that Matt did not so long ago. Uh, I would also like to give a shout out to the artist. So let's share the screen, Matt.
Mm, Get this. This
That's
is all
good.
good. That's all good.
So the song we are going to look at is called "Endless Dawn" by
Well,
oh
sorry. The album is called Endless
ah
Dawn. The song is called N.
cool,
Off of their the album just came out just the beginning of the top of the year. And
awesome.
I got to do the whole project in Atmos, which was a lot of fun. So
So shout out to the artists as
yeah.
well. Check them out on all the major streaming platforms. With that said, let's dive into the session. So can you tell us about how the work started and what was your initial reaction to the song?
So the work started was Actually, I met them for their last record, the one that came right before this. They had come to the studio to listen to some mixes that were done in Atmos by a different engineer. And they came here twice to like come listen, give notes, like they collected notes and went off. And um, I was able to have a really organic relationship with them.
Hmm.
That when this record came up, because it came up very quick, because this is a part of a bunch of songs that were written all together.
Nice.
And so when this record came up, they were like, "Do you want to just go ahead and handle it?" I was like, "Of course, Nick, I would love to." So, uh, they handle all the production, they handle all the mixing, and so the mix that I received, which is this reference one here, that's their approved mix that I get, and then they printed me all the stems that we have here.
Cool.
And they were very flexible,
Hmm.
that if I needed something else to be stemmed out, because I was like, oh, I wish I could play with this a little bit more,
Right.
they were really amiable about like, okay, cool, we'll print that real quick and send it over. So
Cool.
I would say the big thing was that I think they were still getting the tracks mastered while we were doing this. So
Uh-huh.
like it was trying to make sure that the Atmos mixes met what was happening with the master track, but eventually that's what I have here is like their mastered approved version. And yeah, that
Cool.
was fun.
Let's dive in.
Cool.
So I see lots of Fab Filter plugins, but also lots of sound particles plugins.
Yeah.
So let's jump into the tech geekery part of it.
Okay.
What's your approach to plugins and how do you start an Atmos mix?
So this mix was really awesome because the stems were printed very well.
Uh-huh.
So in this session, you'll see here that there isn't like that much in the first instances
Uh-huh.
at all, because they were just such good stems that like moving something didn't change it so dramatically.
Uh-huh.
Every once in a while there was like a situation where I was like, okay, where I move this to the back, because that's where this doorknob effects situation is,
Right.
it created some sort of high-end information that like just was a bit abrasive from the back,
Ah,
that
okay.
wasn't there in the front, because in the stereo version everything's sort of fighting to get through
The space, right?
left and right, yeah. And so when I can move stuff around to have some fun with it, once stuff is like on its own, it just becomes maybe a little too apparent. So
Right.
I would do like a little roll off here just to sort of tame some of that information that is now new, because it's not having to fight through stereo.
Right. Because you
So
have more space to work with.
exactly. So
And how do you use sound particle specific plugins in your
so
mixes?
so what I have going on in my template here is I have these two movement auxes that are ready to go at any moment, that are then going to my object bed that I have here. So this is a 714 object bed, and
Okay.
then I have two movement plugins ready to just start sending stuff to as I feel like it.
All right.
Um
So that's like a bread and butter right there.
Yeah, like, well, so because originally I was using the Dolby Music Panner, which at the time was a really amazing piece of equipment,
Uh-huh.
a really amazing plugin to help move stuff around. And then towards the end of last year, I worked on a record, a Jeezy record, which was, by the time we got the project, it was 29 songs that needed to be done in 3 days.
Wow. Okay.
And so it started becoming a thing where the steps that are entailed with the Dolby Music Panner, whether it's copying all the lanes, which doesn't take as long, but it's still like an extra step,
Right.
or printing in real time, which wasn't gonna fly,
Understood. Uh-huh.
that I wanted something that was easy to like jump into.
Sure.
And the energy panner was just like instantly, I was just like, okay, cool, it's working. And then it was really easy to make musical,
Uh-huh.
which was nice, because like
Right.
it was just like, okay, cool, I just have to like adjust.
Can we hear something in that
Yeah,
with that approach?
yeah, sure. Well, so this main one here, so in the track originally there's a sub
Uh-huh.
here. actually, that is muted because what I'm doing is I'm doing a pre-fader send to this movement plugin or my movement send. That's what I like to call it. That's just my name for it,
Nice. Okay,
right?
that's I like that.
What's cool about this plugin is the sidechain aspect of it.
Uh-huh.
So I sidechained the kick to this sub here. The
Nice.
sub is coming out the LCR, and what you'll see here is that it's then going to move out of that space. What it does is it creates this really cool slight movement that isn't, again, I'm trying to be very tasteful with it. I would like at first I could make it come
Right.
out all the way out in the room, but it's a sub frequency, so bringing it out into the room was like felt very weird. But even just that little bit of movement creates the intensity of what the song is, and it makes some it makes even more room for the kick. And because in Atmos we have so much dynamic range, it's like, all right, well, like, can I push this harder
Exactly.
as long as it's tasteful at the same time,
Yeah.
right? um
Matt, if you don't mind, I want to jump in and explain this a bit more
yeah.
to those who might be new to the concept. Because Energy Panner, I've seen so many people use it, they all jump in with the movement part. Yet when I saw sidechain to people, they're like, is that a new feature? I'm like, no, it's been there for ever,
Yeah.
right? So for those of you who haven't used the sidechain feature in Energy Panner, what Matt is doing in his ingenious way is using the sidechain ducking to create space, right? So most of you, if you have used a compressor, which I hope you have, just kidding, you know what sidechain does, right? It reduces the level usually. And that works in stereo very well because we have a limited bandwidth of dynamic range and also stereo space. What this plugin does is instead of dropping the levels, it's displacing the sound for you to play something else there temporarily. So in this specific instance, Matt is using a kick drum to displace the sonic sub element from those speakers so that the kick can cut through, but without dropping the levels.
Yes.
That's key. So you don't hear any pumping because this is not a compressor. Okay. Yeah. Again, for those of you who might not be very familiar with Energy Panner, this is a dynamic panning plugin. There is no compression happening at all. You will see parameters like threshold, ratio, attack and release, but all those are only triggering movement, which can be left and right, back and forth, going in circles. You do your thing, but we don't do any level adjustment. All we do is displacement. And by side chaining one element with the other, so this is a very great example, right? A kick drum displacing a subsonic element. You can have two singers. That's my usual go-to,
Yeah.
right? If you have a male vocalist and a female vocalist, and I want them to be in the dead center when they're singing their solo pieces.
Mm-hmm.
When they sing together as a duet, I want them to push each other
Yeah.
away from the center, and they glide back when they
Yeah.
finish the other person's piece.
I think that's what I've really enjoyed. Like, why once I started using the Energy Panner, I was just like, okay, like this is nice because it's very musical,
Uh-huh.
like because even like the Dolby Music Panner, which was again like great
Uh-huh.
when I was starting out with Atmos, sometimes even like some of it's really when you would try to get something to pivot around the room,
Yeah.
it didn't feel as musical as this does, and so the more I have it, the more I use it. Like there's right now there's only two instances here,
Uh-huh.
and that's kind of what I start with, but like I am not ashamed to like just keep making more as long as the song calls for it, because sometimes it's like a little too much.
Absolutely. Can you hit play again? Because I want to talk more on this, but I
Yeah.
want to hear this again real quick. So I love the Dolby Music Panel myself. It has its place and its purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, what differentiates Energy Panel is that it's musical. It's reacting to music.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was a swing to the kick,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to pan like a machine. It's not tied to a metronome.
Yeah.
You could even do this real time for
Yeah.
headphone mixes, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
when someone is performing.
Well, and that's the thing about the sidechain as well. Like when I do need it to be a little bit more rigid, I'll make a click track and
Oh, yeah.
side chain the click to it, and then you adjust the threshold so that it always
Genius.
hitting, and so then you can get stuff. You can still get the abilities of what Dolby Panner was doing in Sound Particles in Energy Panner that makes it so much more again, it still stays musical because even when I do that with the click kick or with the click, it still feels more musical and still
Right.
keeps me in the zone and still creates a space because the thing is with like especially with this mix and a lot of the mixes I end up doing, I would say the majority of the Atmos mixes I'm doing are people have already finished the whole record,
Right.
right? And so the master is done, and then they're coming to me, and so I have to be have some really good bedside manner in making sure that like I don't take too many creative liberties.
Sure.
And also some things just don't work. Like putting hi-hats behind your head don't work, doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. And so you were talking originally like what is my first process like once this session is built. I probably listen to every song from top to bottom 3 times in a row to just like settle into what the song is, and like I might take notes of like what feels like ear candy moments,
Right.
and then I'll jump in and start possibly moving some things around to figure out like how I can shape it into something that honors all the work that everyone's already done, right? Because some of these
Yep.
records have been being worked on for like 2 years,
Right.
and then I have to do this Atmos delivery within like 10 days, and
Right. If
so
that.
if
Right.
that, so I'm trying my best to honor all the work that's already been done, which is really easy in this for this song because I also got some liberty from the guys. They
Mhm.
actually came, they sat down with me, we went through the whole record together, and we made like really slight changes together, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, it's really just about honoring the work that's already been done,
That's
and
that's beautiful here.
yeah.
So before we move on from this
Tony,
specific example, two more things I just want to point out is sometimes I do get creative blocks.
Hmm.
One of my favorite use cases of this plugin is using the rolling the dice button,
Yes.
right? So if you randomize things, suddenly I'm like, oh, that works. I wouldn't
Was
have thought about it.
when I did that originally, it's not in play right now because it ended up not working. But so my movement too, there's this pterodactyl sound,
Let's hear it.
and without the movement. So then what I did, and again, like I was just trying to have some fun with it and see if it would work, just to get it to move around. But then yeah, just randomizing just to see if other, depending on the threshold.
Right.
And so I think the thing that's nice is that all the controls are really easy to get your hands on and like start making decisions.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I don't want to spend too much time inside of a plugin,
Yes, absolutely.
especially when I'm mixing, especially in short timelines. I want to be able to just like get into it. And so it's like, all right, cool. Between these four knobs and clicking and dragging things around, like
Hmm.
I can get to a decision pretty quick, you know.
Right. And one thing that might potentially come on QA, but it just came to my mind. Do you find using these plugins in stereo mixes as well, or is it
I will use them in stereo mixes as well. Especially like sometimes I'll use the ambisonic parts
okay?
to just like see
Nice.
because sometimes like it's just like finding ways to have some fun with psychoacoustics a little bit
Yes.
to create some dimension. And so yeah, like every once in a while, like I'll just click through. And I think what's nice is that a lot of the drop down menus are really easy just to get around,
Uh-huh.
that I can make a bunch of decisions, see if they work. If I don't like them, all right, I'm out of here and I move on. Or even like sometimes in stereo, I'll use the binaural
Yep.
setting and mess around with it for some psychoacoustics effects as well. So,
Exactly. Same. Like if those of you who don't actively work in Dolby Atmos, this is still a very powerful plugin.
mhm,
Because if you go, if like he said, if you have a very specific effect, kind of a pad or synth pad or whatnot, or a synth
yeah,
stab, you could actually throw in binaural output because yes, it might have some different monitoring uh, differences when you listen to different speakers,
yeah,
but you will feel that magical spark on stereo as well.
yeah.
So moving on from this example, what else can you show us on the session?
So what else like can I show you? Big thing too that I'm a big proponent of is LFE maintenance. In this instance, when I opened up the session, because I haven't opened it in a little bit, I opened up my little LFE channel here, and I noticed I had only done this curve. If anybody has seen like the UMG documentation or other label documentation, they have curves that they recommend.
Right.
I change it per song depending on the LFE information that I'm sending. So right now for this song, this curve works. There could be other songs where I need to make that change happen to like just get some of that really really low stuff so it's cleaner,
Got it.
because sometimes what feels really like, I got a huge stack of subs in here
That you do.
that can make it feel, I can make it feel very theatrical, but then when I go listen in the headphones, if I'm not paying attention, I'll go listen to the headphones and the LFE is collapsing
Yeah, it's falling
the
apart,
the
right? Yeah.
mix. And so sometimes, if I'm like, okay, it feels good in the room, but I just need to adjust this small move will change everything, right? Or even like being like, actually 130 is just too much. Like, let me go ahead and just bring this down to 100, and really tighten up the LFE. That'll also continue to help translation across the board, because it's, this is, at the end of the day, these are keys,
Absolutely.
they're based on frequencies. And so sometimes some of the LFE sub information that you're sending, like, you're just resonating at different places,
Right.
that these adjustments should be made so that you can really tighten up the LFE even more. So
Thank you for sharing that. On the same vein, how do you keep your high end frequencies cleaner? Because we were speaking about air plugin before we
yeah,
went online,
yeah,
right? So again, those of you who don't know about this specific plugin, we have a plugin called Air at Sound Particles, which pretty much simulates air. And what it does is it reduces that, in my opinion, the needles that you feel with
yeah.
high end. So not just that specific plugin. How do you deal with your high frequency content when you're mixing in Atmos?
So the thing is that Atmos, if you're listening through the tuning, has a tendency to be a little bit darker.
Hmm.
A lot of times what will happen is I end up, probably did it here. Yeah. So Spectre, I love this plugin a lot. I use it all the time. There's multiple instances probably in this session. Um, this Spectre is grouped across all of the channels.
Ah, okay.
And so what this is doing is just reintroducing some of that high end information very nicely, very harmonically. And I'm not doing a lot. It's not even a dB. And that's the thing in Atmos, again, like, it's all salt and pepper. Like, you don't, if you get good stems, if it's a good track, it's even like it's the same thing with the stereo mix. If you get good stems, like,
Right.
you're having a blast. It's actually a lot of fun and it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Same thing with this. Like, if I get good stems, and it's a good production, like, most of the everything I'm doing is pretty salt and pepper. Like, there's not as many moves that I had to make this feel really great.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Less is more, right? This is
yeah,
something I see as a main difference when I get sessions or stems from, really experienced artists versus people who are learning the craft and
yeah,
getting there. Those who are learning will send me sessions with 16 insert plugins and like, oh, I need two more to add, but I didn't have space. So
yeah,
there's a aux track there. And when you get sessions from yourself or
hmm,
other artists that you just mentioned, there's usually just three or four plugins.
yeah.
And even those are usually bypassed or disabled, like again in some of these sessions, right?
Well, and let's see what we have here. There's this guy. Yeah, so these stabs that are just they didn't get moved from the left and right area,
Uh-huh.
but because there's not as much information doing any masking, when I would switch between the stereo reference and the Atmos, something felt lacking. And
Ah,
so
can we
I,
hear that?
yeah. So it's just a little bit of brighten, like, in those frequencies to just get it to, bloom a little bit more.
Right.
That was happening in the stereo reference, where I don't know, the mastering engineer, he could have done some extra lifting that wasn't done on the mix.
Right.
And then even for me, again, because like I'm doing stuff where I'm moving the sub out of the way, out of the front, and because I've moved some of like the pterodactyl and some of those other sound effects away from the stereo field, it's not masking, or it's not
Fighting for
fighting
things.
for
Yeah.
anything. And so it's like, but because of that, I then have to do sometimes these small moves to reintroduce information or feeling that isn't the same between the stereo reference and what I'm
Right.
doing in the room.
That's wonderful. Awesome. What else can we look at in this session?
Let's see what else we got. So, um, I'm a big fan of Seventh Heaven.
Oh, yes.
I had the very pleasure of pretty much every studio I've ever worked at it has a Bricasti.
Because yep, same. The
Like
M7s, right?
yeah, exactly. So the first studio I worked at, Shirk Music and Sound in Chicago, he had a Bricasti, Mr. Steve Shirk, and I fell in love with it then. And then when I worked at Sphere Studios over in North Hollywood, they had a Bricasti. I felt like I kept diving into it, and so they have a surround sound version,
Mm-hmm.
which is awesome.
Yeah.
And so what I have here is I have right now this says plate heaven. Usually by default, this starts as a plate. Clearly, I made some changes.
Uh-huh.
And then this one always is a chamber. So just to get like slightly different feelings depending on what's needed for the sonic information, right?
Got it.
And
And
so
yeah, sorry, just wanted to add that this is also one of my favorite plugins. I too had the pleasure of having three M7s in the
oh, okay.
studio I worked in for 5.1. And the way we would set it was like I would have one M7 just creating a reverb in the front, the
hmm
second one for the mid, and
hmm
the next one for the back. That was just 5.1.
Yeah.
And one of the things I learned when I got introduced to sound particles before I even joined the company
Mhm.
was the plugins like Space Controller, right? Where
Yeah.
you can pan using your phone, or
Yeah.
Energy Panner pairs very, very well with these plugins.
Yeah.
Because if you output like a 714 movement from Energy Panner, the reverb makes it sound as if something was moving.
Well, and so that's what I have here. Also, this is usually how it's set up in my template is that this this movement two, which is this energy panner,
Uh,
this is going to the chamber
nice.
already. So like already, like I'm ready, pretty much the way because these are set up as auxes, like I'm ready to just hear affected sound
Immediately.
immediately, and then I can scale back from there. So it could be again back to this pterodactyl track that we've been messing around with that didn't end up getting the energy panner.
Right.
But just so up here, where is it? You can see how, and I don't know if you can hear it in the binaural, but we can kind of hear it in the room that
Yeah.
like then it settles it
Yes.
very
And it's
differently.
also very natural, right?
Yeah,
It hooks your brain, but it doesn't distract you by saying, hey, look at me, right?
exactly, exactly.
It makes the music sound very organic.
Yeah.
I think that's what I tend to use a lot.
The other thing too that I will do a lot if it calls for it. So when used, depending on the move that is being made, I will sometimes, again, Spectre is one of my favorites, and I'll do the multi mono.
Uh-huh.
And so maybe the rear, when it gets to the rear, it doesn't feel right.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I'll unlink this, go to the rear, whether it's the top right, let's do the left surround, and I'll make these kinds of moves in the same spot. So that way when it does the move, it maintains a sonic character.
Got it.
Because like this is all it's all comb filtering, it's
Yeah.
all
Uh-huh.
this stuff gets darker, some stuff gets brighter depending on where it is.
Right.
Something if you put something on the sides, it can feel more intense. It can feel like sometimes I have to put a compressor on stuff I have on the sides
Right.
because the dynamics are a little bit more intense. And so I'll sometimes do this after, sometimes I might even do it before, like just to like help push the sound and make sure it stays in the song essentially.
Absolutely. Without distracting, right? So
Exactly.
we cannot share the details, but I showed Matt a sneak preview of something that we've been working at Sound Particles. Something new is coming up, people. But one thing we are trying to do, what I showed Matt earlier, was how you can actually simulate the air movement. So, of course, we have the air plugin, but imagine something that's moving in the room and you can actually simulate that moving through the air.
hmm
So I'm very excited for that.
I'm
That's
really
going to
excited
come
for it
up.
too.
But that's all we can
Yeah,
say right
yeah.
now, right, about that.
Once and that I don't have it on this session, but also I am a big fan of Air. Air I use a lot actually for
Do you mind opening it up? You have it on
yeah,
the machine, right?
yeah. Um, it should be on this machine. Oh no,
No, it's all good. We can talk about it.
isn't it called music or
Air for music as well. Yeah,
Air? I thought I had it.
that's all good. So again, that's
That's
it.
the worst. I'm the worst.
That's all good. This just came up during the
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, yeah.
But for those of you who haven't tried Air, I would highly recommend you go to our website and check out the plugin. And Air for Music is actually free.
Yeah.
So Download it, try it. It looks like an EQ. This is the conversation we had earlier.
Yeah.
It is a filter, but it is not a stupid filter. It might look like it, but when you change the distance,
Hmm.
the curve actually changes to simulate a distance,
Yeah.
right?
When the volume change and it's like really my biggest thing that I like to use it for, which is really annoying. It's not
Uh,
on the machine right now.
that's okay.
I have to yell at somebody. Myself probably. Is that sometimes when I'm switching binaural settings in the Dolby renderer,
Uh-huh.
if I'm going from like near to mid, the difference is too dramatic.
Right.
And sometimes what I'll do is I'll then use the air panner, or not air
Air
panner,
plugin.
sorry,
Uh-huh.
air plugin to get in the middle.
Ah, got it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
like okay, like put it on near and then use the plugin to create that simulation that it's getting a little bit further away, which then is really nice because it settles in the mix a little bit better for the headphones as well.
Absolutely. I had some another Atmos mix engineer call me and say, "Oh my God, Air is a lifesaver." And I think I will share this because you might find this fascinating too. The example that this person told me is like, so I have a sound, I move it forward in Atmos, I can feel it
Mhm.
coming out from the speaker, but then I move it back, it feels like it did not move because it's the same brightness, same level. It feels like something is odd.
Yeah,
But when you use air and change the distance, it actually feels like it is moving back and forth
yeah, yeah,
because of, again, it looks simple as a EQ curve, but it is not. So I would highly recommend
yeah,
anyone who's watching to check out Air for music. But this been great, Matt.
yeah. No,
Can we play maybe another part of the
yeah,
session
sure.
and just see some more movement?
Let's go a little bit further here.
Great mix and what a great room.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you would like to show, or we can go into Q&A? Or
Let's go on the Q&A and see. I'm happy to
all right.
keep expanding based and we'll see what's
Yeah,
going on
yeah,
with the
we
Q&A.
haven't seen any of the Q&A. So, Lewis, my friend,
Hi everyone. I don't know.
hey,
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
yes,
I don't know what's going on with my camera. I'm all right. uh, we only have a request from Shan. He was asking previously when you were showing the sub with the energy banner with the kick on the sidechain.
Mhm.
If you could solo the sub and then mute and unmute the kick so we can hear it moving out of the way.
sure, yes. So keep in mind that's LFE information. Here's to hoping it translates well through binaural because in this room it sounds great, right on my chest.
Yeah. All right. So hopefully that translated well. The big thing you'll notice as well is that the sub, though muted here, I'm doing a pre-fader send to my movement plugin for this energy panner situation. And so the reason I did that is because I'm leaning so hard on the energy panner to not have weird phase problems.
Right.
This is now my sub sound,
Oh, wow.
not this channel. This channel is all this is doing is helping send us some LFE and helping to handle the movement, but it's not doing really anything else except really holding on to the waveform at
Wow.
that point. Because if I were to bring this in, if we solo both of these, what you have then is a volume discrepancy because the sub gets going to get that much louder,
Right.
but in that loudness is also phase problems because we're doing this move with the energy panner, but then we're also here, and it's not. You would think there are situations where that might help ground the sound, but
Right.
in this situation, it would not help that at
Right,
all.
but it actually adds a pulse, right? It's like a
Yeah.
heartbeat
Yeah.
that's, a heart moves when it beats.
Exactly. Yeah.
This in this room feels like that. So one, truly honored and compliments to my engineering team who don't get compliments like this, right? The fact that you trust Energy Panner
Yeah.
to keep everything in phase, that's a huge compliment
Yeah.
for my team who works very hard in Portugal. So kudos to my engineering team and my CEO and everybody else who makes these amazing plugins.
Mhm.
But speaking about phase, this is another reason why this room speaks for itself,
Mhm.
right? You mentioned earlier that one of the things that you focus on is phase when you mix. Can
Yeah.
you elaborate on that? Why this room matters to you?
So the room matters to me because I didn't know this until I was working in here. That stuff out of phase in the Atmos room, I get a bodily reaction to it. My
Right.
nose will like before my brain
You get
recognizes
allergic to it?
kind of well before my brain recognizes that it's a phase problem, my nose will do this thing where it flares up, where I'm just like, oh, that's not good, and then I'm like, oh, it's because it's out of phase. And so what's great about this room and what's great about not seeing the speakers for my brain is that if I want to put something on the side, let's say it's a flanging guitar,
Sure.
that might feel really weird, but I like it. But then I'm like, oh, if I just put it up, 2% forward, because again, it's in Atmos, it's so much salt, and like just little bits can
Right.
do a lot. If I move it up 2% forward, all of a sudden it's fixed and I feel better and I can keep moving forward. And so I think that's really huge. Trusting the room to know that what I'm mixing and what our other clients are working on. I mean, John Castelli and Aaron Forbes, they mixed the whole Billie Eilish record
Okay.
in Atmos here,
Nice.
and that has translated really well. Me and Key and Reardon, we co-mixed the St. Vincent record in here, and so having the trust of those kinds of huge records to be like, okay, that doesn't sound right, and then to know that when it goes out into the world that it's going to be fine, I think that's a huge benefit of the room. And I mean, we QC, we listen on headphones, we listen
Of
to spatials,
course.
but like you can do a mix in the room and feel about 95% that you're good to go.
Yeah, your confidence, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that this room translates or shows wrong things right is
Yeah.
one of the key things,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Because like you said, a good room and good tools. Again, like I said, we take pride in making products that are phase coherent, and there's so much engineering behind that plugin.
Yeah.
It looks nice, it is easy to use,
Yeah.
but don't discount the fact that there's lots of PhD grade stuff
Yeah.
happening in the back end.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, JD from Westlake Pro, would you like to come on and say a few words?
Absolutely. First of all, just amazing stuff. I use the sound particle stuff myself in my mixes. I'm nowhere near as accomplished as Mr. Cerritos here, but I still, I have a deep appreciation for this stuff. And a question though that I have for you guys is, so sound particles, you sell directly on your website, but it's also available through dealers such as ourselves and Sweetwater, all your major pro audio companies. What would you say? And Matt, maybe this is a question for you. What's the benefit to just purchasing directly versus working with more of a white glove, full service pro audio company? Do you find that it helps to pick your plugins based on how you've built your room, or what's your process for something like that?
I mean, through purchasing, I don't know, it's just nice to have a buddy.
Absolutely.
You know, at the end of the day, it's just nice to be able to call someone up and it's, you know, I think when we're as mixers, we're kind of in a dark room a lot by ourselves,
Hmm.
you know, and
Right.
comes to be when it comes to making some big decisions, whether it's a studio build, whether it's buying just like a couple plugins, you know, I think it's really nice to be able to reach out to somebody who it honestly it's like having a doctor, right? It's like they know my history,
Right.
they doing, you know, it's just a nice aspect of it. So I'm a big fan of working with dealers
Yeah.
when I can. So
I want to jump in on that. So in my previous life, I used to be a scoring mixer engineer, and I worked with Westlake Pro and other resellers too whenever I needed things. One example I will proudly share is I was doing a mix on a Saturday evening mix prep. I was going to start the mix on Monday. I
mhm,
was prepping for the mix on Saturday evening around 7 p.m. when my lead engineer and I realized we needed two more HDX cards and some other interfaces. Tried calling everyone. Amazon won't do much,
mhm.
even if they had it in stock. Long story short, I called Joe Topier, who's the owner of Westlake Pro, at
Right.
around 6 p.m. Saturday evening, and by 9 p.m. I had him personally coming and giving me the stuff I needed. That cannot happen unless you have a reseller with whom you have a relationship with,
Yeah.
right? And people like Stephen Bannister, who I've known for way over a decade at Westlake Pro, I could call Stephen and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a new compressor to shape the sound. What's new?"
Yeah.
So I don't have to
Right.
sit at Google University and wait 6 hours of time when I know someone who has the expertise and the passion and knows what I already own. To Matt's point,
Yeah.
right? Stephen and Joe have my history of what equipment I have, and all your colleagues at Westlake Pro always, JD, recommends what pairs well with my workflow and what I have. Same with Sound Particles products. You guys have been amazing partner for us at Sound Particles, and we would like to thank you again for the continued support. Louis,
Absolutely. And um, I just want to say thank you, Tony. That goes both ways. You know, we had an Atmos event here, and I called Tony. I said, "Do you want to come on by?" And it was so helpful to be able to show off the sound particle stuff and have just the guy here to explain stuff, you know, in such detail and in person. And just our relationship just means so much. So, again, thank you guys.
thanks, JD. And I know we have a global audience attending, but any of you, if you are based in Los Angeles, feel free to hit any of us up. We would love to grab coffee or listen to stuff in Atmos at Westlake Pro. Or if you're looking for a studio space, come
Yeah.
to Just for the Record.
Yep.
And I just wanted to ask, Louis, do we have any more questions or closing
Yes,
comments?
yeah, we have like five more maybe. So
All
we
right.
have
Cool.
Stephen here asking if you are using the LFE channel only to add some low frequency into the Dolby Atmos mix, or you use it as a full copy of all the bass information from all stems.
Um, yeah, if I'm understanding the question correctly, you can see here that only a few. So right now, my kick and this sub are the only thing that are going to my LFE sends. And they're at different volumes. Again, like I'm trying to create a clean LFE. You know, Atmos started in movies first, right? So it is I use it for the ear candy. I use it to help push something.
Right.
So like I don't want to just like fully take LFE information from everything and send it, or else the LFE is then going to become muddy and unclean. And so in my pursuit to help get, you know, hit that -18, but and utilize that dynamic range, I want it to be as clean as I can make it and as musical as I can make it. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah. And LFE is often, I think, misunderstood for bass management.
Yeah, I think some people will sometimes send the full range like, you know, that's if I like turn this off. Let's just show it real quick. If we just bypass this and solo you might not be able to hear it in the binaural. I don't know how it's transmitting.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we bypassed it and didn't do this roll off, then the LFE channel would just like it just starts again. I don't want the headphone mix to fall apart. I don't want the speaker mix to fall apart. I want everything to be clear and dynamic.
Exactly. And one thing, this is actually, I want to add something to this. So maybe you know this. We actually make a synthesizer called Skydust,
I do, yeah.
right? And even our other plugins, even the standalone sound particles have 714 microphones, and
Hmm.
we support all the dot one, but we do not synthesize or create the dot one information for musical products.
Yeah.
The reason being, LFE, like you said earlier, came from the cinematic world when they're using that to increase the low end frequency range. For music, what you actually need is a well tuned room like this,
Yeah.
where there is bass management and use LFE to borrow his words, like salt and pepper.
Yeah.
Less is always more.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So we have one more question from Edward asking how all your auxes are working and what's on your master bus and how do you manage mastering?
So auxes, most of these aux stems again are all if I'm getting good stems, I shouldn't be having to do too much work to have to rebuild the mix to make it feel like the stereo mix. When I build the session, I listen to the Atmos mix going through the stereo bed, and then I listen to the stereo mix, and I just try to match them as much as I can, and then I start mixing. The auxes that I have down here, the majority of them are just my reverbs and a couple up mixers. So two seventh heavens here, like I was saying. Oh man. Might get an error after that. Two seventh heavens here, two up mixers here, two movements. I had moved it up here when we were doing that bass
Right.
check. And then good old Steve Genowick a long time ago. He because there's some stereo reverbs that I like Valhalla,
Uh-huh.
and they don't make a surround sound reverb. So what then I'm doing is I have these three instances that are then front, mid part of the room, and then
Like
rear.
my broadcast is.
Yeah, and then I'm using a delay to simulate that it's moving across the room. So, but these are the majority of my auxes. Handling mastering, it really depends. So I have a key here that is the mix that is then being sidechained to some limiters as I need to create that same sort of closeness that the stereo mix might have versus what the Atmos mix has.
Right.
And then the Dolby album assembler has a lot of really great tools in it to make it so that it's really easy to get that final stage across to make sure that like files can be accepted in the deliverable process.
Nice. Some.
Good.
Anything else?
We have some other question that I think it's valid following this previous one that is from Chris asking how do you approach an Atmos mix when you are brought in after the stereo mix has been done by someone else?
Oh, that's annoying. I guess my eye lock is being weird. Westlake, I need a new eye lock. Um, so if I'm getting the stereo mix again, earlier, I don't know if maybe the person wasn't on, but I will, once I build the session, then sit with the songs. I will listen to them 3 times in a row to just like really be a part of the song, and I'll take notes of things that possibly could move, possibly can be moved around, some ideas I might have, because every song has a piece of ear candy. There's a reason for it the song to exist, right? And so I try to envelop myself in that stereo frame of mind to then switch to Atmos, which then allows me to take almost like a bird's eye view,
Right.
and then I'd start making those kinds of moves in an effort to again just make sure that I'm being true to all the work that's been done already. All the vocals that
Absolutely.
have been tracked, all the drums that have been time aligned, all the man, this is getting really annoying. All of that work that's already been done. I'm not
Right.
trying to I'm trying to help elevate it. I'm not trying to
Exactly.
create something brand new. So yeah. Hope that answered that question.
Okay. Now we have Edward again asking if you are tuning your room with Trinov or with another system.
So we have the Avid Matrix units at our studio, and that has their SPQ card,
Mhm.
and so the tuning is taken care of in the Avid Matrix software.
Okay. And Stephen asking what tools are you using for seeing phase problems, if
I
you are using.
My go-to is the S1 by Waves. Um and then again, it's salt and pepper. Sometimes I literally just have to like do go up 10 like down to 90 and that fixes all my problems. Hey, hey, hey. Yeah, this thing is awesome. Especially because it's every once in a while I would use the isotope imager when depending on the frequency base of the information, but a lot of times this is my first reach is for the S1
S1,
stereo.
okay.
Yeah. And then literally like sometimes dropping it down to 90 because as you move stuff around too, again, like you start to things things start to present themselves as you utilize
The space,
the
right?
space for it. And so once those things appear, it's like, okay, well, that wasn't the intention. I don't think anybody was thinking about that. It just wasn't a problem in the stereo mix. It's
Right.
now a problem now. Let me do this. And these little moves help. Even sometimes some width helps a little bit too. So if I'm putting stuff in the ceilings and it doesn't feel like it's in the same space that it was in the stereo mix as far as like maybe intensity or dynamics, I
Right.
might then spread it out just a little bit. But yeah, S1 is the first one that
Yeah,
I go
it's,
for.
I immediately thought back to something. So, often when you go up from stereo or even from 5.1 to Atmos, I opened up one of the scores I mixed 10 years ago in 5.1 and I was trying to atmosify it. And
Mm-hmm.
one thing I immediately realized is I had two elements, like somewhere here.
Mm-hmm.
It is 5.1, right? So there was no height.
Yeah.
The moment I moved one thing up, suddenly the problems with the other thing became evident because it is not being masked anymore,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So unmasking is what I tend to call it.
Yeah, I guess that's really what it is. It's like as we mix in this format, whether it's for film, whether it's for, you know, soundtracks, or whether it's for pop music or rock music, you have to be a little careful. There was one track I was working on where the cello in the song felt really cool to be behind us. But then as we were listening to it, I was making notes with the artist. We were both confused. We're like, I was like, I don't have a click track. Why is there a click?
Ah,
And then we soloed the cello and we learned that because he was doing something, this special effect with the cello, but he had one headphone off, and because the he had printed the it was heavily compressed and it was like a
so the
really
click was bleeding
the
through.
click was beating through, and like no matter amount of RX would have helped it because it was so a part of the sound now
Right.
that it was just like, all right, put it back forward, and then it was lost in the stereo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like and they didn't know it because they were working in stereo. The stereo mixer didn't catch it. They were working in stereo. It wasn't until I moved it to the back and tried to make it a focal point, not
Right.
just a texture,
Ah, yes. Yeah.
that's when we noticed that there was a problem. So yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Any other questions?
So now we don't have any more questions, but I will make one myself.
Okay.
So when I was just curious about when you use our plugins, the panners, energy panner, brightness panner, in which phase of the mixing process do you use them? Because normally some engineers might first do like a quick panning, then maybe EQ, and then leave like the automations and movement for the end part. So you bring the plugins only in the end, in the middle. It depends
I
on the
I
project.
I make that decision back to what I was saying when I'm listening to the stereo version to envelop myself and come up with ideas and try and get inspired. I will write down that I'm gonna do it from before I even start moving stuff around in the Atmos mix. I'm potentially inspired to make that decision while I'm listening to the stereo version. And so it is in it like I write it down. It's part of my to-do list of stuff that I want to try, and it's already a part of the mix. So wherever I'm because when I start mixing, I'm kind of just jumping around like trying to like build it and make it feel, I want to stay connected to the song as much as I can. So once I don't feel inspired, I look down at my notes. I'm like, okay, cool, that's the next thing I got to take care of. And sometimes it's the beginning, sometimes it's the end, but I've already decided I'm going to try and do something with the energy panner or the brightness panner.
Great.
Wonderful. Awesome. So with that, we are almost hitting 1 hour. So we should close. I would like to give a shout out to the artist once again, if you want to pull up the
Oh yeah.
Apple Music. So,
Nope.
oops. That's render. But
Yeah.
hey,
Hey,
so
Dolby Render.
yes, thanks again. A shout out to the artists, Sultan and Shepherd, for letting us use this session to explain how this amazing engineer, Matt Cerritos, does his Atmos mixes. So thank you, Matt,
No, thank you.
for
Thank
taking
you.
the time, for your continued support of sound particles and music in general. And once again, a shout out to Just for the Record for hosting us for this webinar and our friends at Westlake Pro. And to each and every one of you for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much. And until next time,
Thank you guys.
thank you. Bye bye.